Just a moment. Okay, tonight we celebrate Pesach Sheni, a very special holiday. And just one more second. There. Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. So, Pesach Sheni is the 14th of Iyar. It's a holiday that was invented by the Jewish people. How or why? The Jewish people made one Pesach sacrifice in the desert, and then, in Egypt, and then they thought, okay, that's it. As we will see, that was a bumpy road, the one of offering Pesach sacrifices. So everybody knows about the main Pesach that we celebrate the 15th of Nisan, but not too many know that tonight, the 14th of Iyar, exactly a month after we offer this, celebrate traditional Pesach, there is something called Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach, or Pesach Katan, the way that the Mishnah describes it. And how do we celebrate it? We don't do much really. We eat matzah tonight. Yes, again, if you can have shmura matzah, eat shmura matzah. If not, you can eat the regular stuff. Tonight we will learn the how, what, and why of this Pesach Sheni, because there is no other holiday that has a Sheni. There is no Rosh Hashanah Sheni, Yom Kippur Sheni, no need to fast another day. No, only Pesach there is a Sheni. So we will look in the sources of the Torah, where the story happened in the year 2449, when we were commanded to do the post-Pesach, post-Exodus sacrifice, because the first Pesach was very specific and had to be done indoors. The people could not go out, which is very amusing for me that this year we celebrated Pesach exactly the same way. And then it changed. So let's see text number 1. I hope you all have your texts. Student page 43. וידבר השם משה מדבר סיני בשנה שני לצאתם מארץ מצרים בחודש הראשון לאמור. If not, you can follow. It's in the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 9, verses 1 to 5, which means God spoke to Moshe in the desert of Sinai in the second year of their exodus from the land of Egypt in the first month, saying, the children of Israel should make the Pesach sacrifice in its appointed time. On the afternoon of the 14th of this month, you should make it in its appointed time, in accordance with all its statutes, all its ordinances, you should make it. Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, instructing them to make the Pesach sacrifice. So they made the Pesach sacrifice in the first month, on the afternoon of the 14th day of the month in the desert of Sinai, according to all that God had commanded them, so did the children of Israel do. Now, the chronological order here seems to be a bit off, because the book of Bamidbar in the desert, it has this name because of the census that God did for the Jewish people that happened on the second month of the second year. So we're talking about Iyar 2449. And Pesach had been a month earlier. So if the book starts in the month of Iyar of the year 2449, why do then when we reach chapter 9, we go back a month in time? So Rashi explains that God didn't want to start the book highlighting something negative about the Jewish people. What was negative? But even though we were commanded on the first year that we were in the desert to do the Pesach sacrifice, that was the only time that we did it in the desert. For 39 years, didn't happen again. So the Torah kind of buried later in the middle of the book. It's not to highlight so much the fact that the Jewish people did not do the sacrifice for 39 years. So let's see what Rashi says, text number 2. In the first month, the portion at the beginning of the book of Numbers was not said until Iyar. From this, you'll learn that there is no chronological order in the Torah. Very important rule. But why did the scripture not begin with this chapter? For it is a disgrace to Israel that throughout the 40 years, the children of Israel were in the desert. They brought only this Pesach sacrifice alone. It's like someone that pays taxes, but for 20 years he didn't. He's not going to start bragging and saying, look, I'm such a tzaddik, because he doesn't want to get too much attention from the IRS and don't want them to look too much into his files. So we have to understand exactly why the Jewish people didn't do the sacrifice for so long. So it wasn't really due to laziness, because the reality is that the Jewish people were not obligated to offer the Pesach sacrifice until they arrived to the land of Israel. So then what is the shame? If you didn't have to do it and you didn't do it, there is no shame really on it. Very clearly, Torah says, when you enter the land. Let's see text number 3. And you should keep this matter as a statute for you and your children forever. And it should come to pass when you enter the land that God will give you, as he spoke, that you shall observe this service. And Rashi explains it should come to pass when you enter. Scripture makes this commandment contingent upon their entry into the land. But in the desert, they were obligated only to bring one Pesach sacrifice, the one they performed during the second year, which they did by divine mandate. So the mitzvah of offering the Pesach sacrifice only came into the effect when they arrived to the land of Israel. So we're saying, what is the disgrace that we're hiding that the Jewish people didn't do? There was no obligation to do a sacrifice. What is the big deal? So the Rebbe asks, text number 4, says, Rashi's answer, for it's a disgrace to Israel that throughout the 40 years the children of Israel were in the desert, they brought only this Passover sacrifice alone, doesn't seem to make sense. What is the disgrace here? Rashi already explained above that scripture makes this commandment, the Pesach sacrifice, contingent upon their entry into the land. But in the desert, they were obligated only to bring one Pesach sacrifice, the one they performed in the second year, which they did by divine mandate. In other words, they were explicitly obligated to bring the offering only in the land of Israel. So Tosfot brings a whole different understanding here. And they say, no, it's not the fact that they didn't bring the sacrifice. The shame here is that they spent 40 years in the desert. You know, when we went out of Egypt, we were in Sukkot. That was the gathering point. From Sukkot to Jerusalem, you know how far it is? 230 miles. Let's say you really go slow. It doesn't take 40 years. Why took them so long? That is the shame. The 40 years was a punishment for the sins of the spies. When the spies came back and they gave a bad report and said, we won't be able to conquer the land, our children, God forbid, will die. God said, oh, really? You think so? Actually, the opposite will happen. You will not enter, and your children, they will enter. So only after every one of those complainers died at the age of over 60 years old, that's why it took 40 years, because God doesn't punish people below 20 years usually. Din doesn't punish. So nobody all those complainers that were 20 and over, nobody died younger than 60. That's why it took 40 years. So nevertheless, Tosfos said that the disgrace was that it took so long to get to Israel, nothing to do with the Pesach sacrifice. This is the text, number 5. The question arises, they weren't obligated to bring the Pesach sacrifice in the desert. If so, why is the failure to bring it considered a disgrace? Rather, the disgrace is that it took them 40 years to enter the land due to the sin of the spies, which is why they weren't obligated. Had they not sinned and thus merited to enter the land right away, they would have been obligated to bring the offering then. But the Rebbe says, this is not so straightforward. It's not so simple. The average student that reads this says, the problem here is that they didn't bring the Pesach sacrifice. We don't even know about the sin of the spies that's going to happen later. Right now, the Jewish people think we are 3 days away from Israel. So even more, it's not the only mitzvah they couldn't do until they enter the land. They couldn't do the laws of Shemitah, the resting of the sabbatical year. They couldn't bring the gifts of produce to the Kohanim, to the Levihim, and all of those were put on hold for 40 years, not even 39. Pesach, at least they did once. All the others were completely put on hold. So why do we choose this mitzvah to be the disgrace and to say, oh, look, we have to bury it somewhere? So the Rebbe says the following, text number 6. If you consider the failure to bring the Pesach sacrifice in the desert a disgrace, because they shouldn't have sinned and shouldn't have been in the desert for so long, the following question emerges. It's not just the failure to bring the Pesach sacrifice, which is a disgrace. It's also failure to sell any of the other mitzvot that only take effect upon entering the land. Why then is the Pesach sacrifice singled out as a sign of this disgrace? To the contrary, the Pesach sacrifice was at least observed once in the desert, unlike the others. So we have a good question. So we'll put a little bit aside our question and we'll go back to the original Pesach. The original Pesach, people were warned, they were given 2 weeks time to get organized on Rosh Chodesh. We're saying 2 weeks, you will have to bring a Korban Pesach to God. So get your animals, do groups, they had to be organized. And there was a group of people that felt left out. Who? Those who were tameh, those who were in state of impurity. As the Torah says in Bamidbar, "Vayu anashim asher tmeim lenefesh adam ve'lo yochlu lasot ha'pesach bayom ha'u, vayikrevu lifnei Moshe ve'lifnei Aaron bayom ha'u." There were men who were ritually unclean because of contact with a dead person, and therefore could not make the Pesach sacrifice on that day. So they approached Moshe and Aaron that day. Those men said to him, we're ritually unclean because of a dead person. Why should we be excluded as not to bring the offering of God in its appointed time with all the children of Israel? Moshe said to them, wait, and I will hear what God instructs you to do. So it's interesting because one of the biggest mitzvot, yesterday I had opportunities to bury someone. It's a great mitzvah. So they were ritually impure but not because they have sinned. Somebody has to bury those who pass away. If everybody says, I want to remain pure, I want to be whole, it's not about holiness, it's about ritual impurity. It's often brought because of a mitzvah. So, but what's interesting also is what they claim is this lama nigara. Why should be left out was based on their experience. The year before, the Pesach that was offered in Egypt, nobody was excluded. Why? Because there were not any requisites. You didn't have to be pure. You didn't have to meet any specific requirements. You were Jewish, you were in your home, you offer the sacrifice. Why? Because actually I misspoke. It was not a sacrifice, it was a zebach. Zebach means shechita. Just take an animal and you kill it. You didn't have to have an altar, you didn't have kohanim. It was not a sacrifice. They were told to take an animal that was the god of the Egyptians and show that they have no part in the idolatry and kill it. So based on that experience, that even those who were not pure were allowed to participate, they say, what Manishtana, what is different? Why can't we offer it like last year that everybody was allowed? So this is text number 8 from Chezkiah Manoach. The impure individuals ask, why are we not allowed to eat it in a state of impurity? After all, last year we were allowed to partake the Pesach rite in Egypt, even if we were impure. And that's when God told them, wait a minute. This is an entirely different experience. This is a real sacrifice. And only those who are pure can bring it. Nevertheless, because you ask and you don't want to be less, you'll get your second chance. In a month later, God invented a holiday and a mitzvah because of a group of Jews that they said, we don't want to miss on doing a mitzvah for Hashem. Let's see text number 9. God spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel saying, any person who becomes unclean from contact with the dead or is in a distant journey, whether among you or in future generations, you shall make a Pesach sacrifice for God in the second month, on the 14th day, in the afternoon they should make it, they shall eat it with unleavened cakes and bitter herbs. Should not leave anything over from it until the next morning. They should not break any of its bones. They should make it in accordance with all the laws connected with the Pesach sacrifice. So, first of all, even if someone was at fault, because you can say, hey, why was he traveling? Okay, impure, you can't help it, but why was far away? Plan better your travels and be there, be in Jerusalem for the sacrifice. Nevertheless, God gives a second chance. Of course, all the people took the opportunity, and Pesach Sheni became an enshrined law that we always have a second chance. If we miss the first Pesach, we have the second, and it's basically the sacrifice itself is identical. Has to be roasted, and it has to be eaten with matzah and bitter herbs, and you cannot break any of the bones. As the text says, both the primary Pesach lamb and the second Pesach are alike in that offering them supersedes the Shabbat prohibition. Hallel is recited when they are offered, they are eaten roasted in their one house, together with matzah and bitter herbs. In neither instance may their meat be left over until the next morning, nor may their bones be broken. So the similarities end here, really. You don't have to clean up your whole house of chametz. You don't have to respect like a Yom Tov, that you can't do work. It pretty much is business as usual, besides the fact that you offer the Korban Pesach. And the Rambam further explains, text 10b, says, what are the differences between the first and second Pesach sacrifice? When the first is offered, chametz is forbidden to be seen or possessed in one's domain. It may not be slaughtered while one is in possession of chametz. Its meat may not be removed from the company in which it was designed to be eaten. That halal must be recited when it's eaten. A festive offering is brought with it. With regard to the second Pesach, by contrast, both leaven and matzah may be in the person's possession. Halal is not recited while partaking of it. It might be taken out of the company which was assigned to be eaten, a festive offering is also not brought with it. So we go back now to the original question. If the Jews were not obligated to offer the Pesach sacrifice in the desert, what shame is in the fact that they didn't? So Pesach Sheni, the holiday starts tonight, teaches a very powerful lesson. These people were not obligated to bring the sacrifice. Yet, they said, Lama Nigora, why should we be less? Why? We don't want to miss out on this amazing opportunity to connect with God. We want to get on the action. We want to do it. Yes, we don't have to. We're exempted. But they refuse to let a mitzvah pass by and watch others do it and not do it themselves. Even though common sense is, if you miss the boat, you miss the boat. Like, this is all about second chances. But they say that if at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you. So they miss the boat. You can say, that's it, it's gone. No, they say, we want somehow to offer it. We care too much. Text 11. Because a few individuals protested and said, why should we lose out? God established Pesach Sheni on the 14th of Iyar, enabled them to bring the Pesach sacrifice. This is something unprecedented in any other mitzvah or sacrifice. Generally, the rule, if its day passes, its offering is cancelled. So, the proactive efforts of these people are touching and remarkable. And they make everybody else also look bad. Because the fact that the Jewish people did not bring a korban for 39 years, even though they were exempted to do so, they should have learned from the crowd of the Pesach Sheni and said, we don't have to, but we want to. God, please find us a way to do it. They didn't get the message. Who cares if technically you're not obligated to do it? They should ask, please, God, we volunteer, we want to do it. Yes, I don't have to, but text number 12. How is that for all the remaining 39 years the Jewish people were in the desert, they didn't demand of God, why should we lose out, expressing a wish to bring the offering to God, the Pesach sacrifice, especially considering that this sacrifice was help them achieve their redemption from Egypt. So if a small minority was able to convince God to create a new holiday, to give him a second chance, if all the Jewish people would have asked, for sure. So the fact that we fail to take initiative and demand, please God, find us a way to do it, is considered a disgrace. And that's why the Torah buries it on the 9th chapter of Bamidbar, to avoid portraying the Jewish people in a negative light. So this is a very profound lesson for us today, because when the Jewish people were in the desert, there were many mitzvot that were not obligated to perform. And today also, there are many mitzvot that we're not obligated to perform, because many mitzvot have only very specific times, place, or circumstances. For instance, so many mitzvot require the Bet HaMikdash, require the temple in Jerusalem to be standing. So if we take out all those mitzvot from the 613 that require the temple, you know how many we have left? Only 369 mitzvot. And many of them can only be observed in the Holy Land, in Israel, for instance, Shemitah. So those who are in diaspora, like we are, have even less mitzvot. Now, out of these mitzvot, they're not mandatory, many of them. For instance, if you don't want to eat meat, there is not mitzvah to do a shechita. There is a mitzvah to write a get in case of a divorce. But if you love your wife, thank God, you never have to follow the instructions of the mitzvah of divorce. There's a mitzvah not to be late on paying your employees. If you never hire anybody, you also don't have that mitzvah. So the Sefer HaChinuch makes a accounting that there is only 270 mitzvot that you can perform, doesn't matter where you live, outside of Israel. Text 13. Altogether, there are 369 mitzvot that are applicable in the current era. Many of these are only obligatory under certain circumstances. Sometimes a person will never be obligated in his whole life to fulfill them. For example, there are people who never hire others, so they never become obligated to pay the workers on time. Similarly, some of the Torah's prohibition only come into effect as a result of a person's deeds. By avoiding those deeds, is not bound by the prohibition. For example, the prohibition about delaying fulfillment of vows only falls upon one who is taking a vow. One who never takes a vow can never violate that prohibition. The same is true in many other mitzvot. All told, there are 99 circumstantial mitzvot, 7-8 that are obligatory and 29 not. The number of mitzvot that apply to every Jew, regardless of circumstance, is 270 only, equaling the numerical value of the word awake, as in the verse, I sleep but my heart is awake. Of those, 48 are positive mitzvot and 222 are prohibitions. So now that we know that out of the 613 mitzvot, there is only 270 that we are actually obligated to do, what do we do? We can adopt the attitude of the Pesach Sheni crowd that says, Lama nigora, why should we lose out on this opportunity to connect with God? Or we can take the attitude of the other Jews that for 39 days didn't offer a sacrifice and say, oh, phew, thank God. You know, when we're reading the loss of purity and impurity and, you know, the loss of taking to the mikvah mattress, seems like quite a job, you know. Oh, thank God I don't have to do it. It's like someone that says, oh, I'm glad that this year my parents or my in-laws didn't come for Pesach, you know, or because it's stressful. You know, in one hand, you can say stressful. On the other hand, you know, it's a big opportunity. It's a mitzvah. And even if you do it, when you do it with joy. And when you can't do it, you can't be held responsible for it. But the lesson from Pesach Sheni is that we must cherish the opportunity to do every mitzvah. And even if you can't, look for ways. For instance, it's a very important mitzvah to give tzedakah before you pray. Why? If there is no poor people around, so the Rebbe Rashab will go out and look for a person in need before praying in order to fulfill this mitzvah of helping the poor before tzedakah, before prayers. There is also people that fill up stadiums to witness the mitzvah of Pidyon Petar Rachamor, to redeem the firstborn of a donkey that is born. Or, for instance, the mitzvah of Birkat HaChama. It's a mitzvah with the once every 28 years when the sun returns to its original position when the creation of the world. Of course, if it's cloudy, it's okay, I don't have to do it. But some people, remember, rented helicopters to be able, if God forbid it was cloudy, they go above the clouds and they're able to say the blessing. This is the lesson that we learn from the crowd of the Pesach Sheni. Say, Lama nigra, we don't want to miss out. Yes, I'm not obligated, but I want to. And this is why the Pesach Seder, we ask Hashem, please, we feel incomplete. Please, we want to offer the Pesach sacrifice. You know, every year, so when we're having the sandwich of matzah and bitter herbs, so we're missing the meat. We're missing the main thing. God, we want Mashiach. We're not okay with the status quo. We don't accept it. Let's see the text of the Haggadah, number 14. Blessed, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher galanu v'galat anu mitzrayim. Blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe, who has redeemed us and redeemed our fathers from Egypt and enabled us to attain this night to eat matzah, maror, bitter herbs. So to God, our God and God of our fathers, enable us to attain other holidays and festivals that will come to us in peace, with happiness in the rebuilding of your city and with rejoicing in your service in the Bet HaMikdash, when we should eat of the sacrifices and Pesach offerings, whose blood should be sprinkled on your wall of your altar for acceptance, and we shall thank you with a new song for our redemption and for the deliverance of our souls. Blessed are you, God, who redeemed Israel. So this is the blessing of Lama Nigora. Why should we miss out? We highlight the merits of Pesach Sheni attitude. We compare it to the failure of the Jews regarding the 39 years on the desert, and we wage war against complacency in exile. We're not happy. Why there is so many mitzvot, God, that we cannot fulfill. And that's why we ask every day, multiple times a day from God, we want Mashiach. As the last text says, 15, the above teaches us the importance of crying out. Why should we lose out? The prayers of the Jewish people as a whole, and certainly the heartfelt pleas of every individual asking God to bring the final and complete redemption, as we recite 3 times a day in the Amidah, bring the redemption to reality speedily in our days. So the more point is to make sure that it's not lip service, but when we consider the world around us is so dark, and that the light of God didn't reach every facet of our reality, we see portions of our lives that need illumination. We need the light of Mashiach. We need the light of Hashem. So we have to say, Lama Negora, why should we miss out? We want that. When we see people around us that could benefit from that light, we have to share with them, make them aware of Judaism, teaching them how to ask for Mashiach and make it a reality. So just to recap what we learned today. Those who were impure in the desert, they were exempted. They didn't have to, but they asked God, and God created a whole new holiday just for them, and they didn't miss out. On the other hand, those who say, okay, we don't have to do until we reach the land, it's considered shameful behavior. It's a problem if you don't desire to do the mitzvot for Hashem. I said, I want to. We should be seeking out also to do more and more mitzvot. We have to challenge the status quo of the exile. Says, God, we want to do all 613 mitzvot. Please build the Bet HaMikdash very soon. We want to serve you the best possible way. Thank you all for joining. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask at this time.
How are you, Rabbi?
Shalom, Mika, מה נשמע?
בסדר. רציתי שתדע משהו שמאוד מתקשר למה שרק אמרת הרגע ולמדנו עכשיו. אז אמרתי בעצם, למה לא? זה לא משהו קשה לעשות, אז התחלתי במוצאי שבת לעשות איזו סעודה קטנה, מלווה מלכה.
יפה, כל הכבוד.
זה נחמד.
יופי, יופי, אשריך, אשריך. It's a beautiful mitzvah to do the Saturday night meal, you know, to escort the Shabbat, Melave Malka. Yes, it's a big, and it's a way, as we learned a few weeks ago, to show that you eat for God, not for any other reason, because after the children, who can eat Saturday night? But we do it anyways to show that we do it to honor Shabbat. Beautiful. Kol hakavod.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Malcolm. Good night. Okay, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we'll have another study. Everybody's invited. Laila Tov.